Welcome participants to this session from reporting to payments, current state and trends of REDD Plus reporting to the UNFCCC. This is a webinar for the community of the Global Forest Observations Initiative, hosted by the FAO. My name is Till Nave. I am a consultant on climate change issues with FAO. I am your moderator for the next hour. My very first task is to introduce Astrid Agostini, who is going to say a few welcome remarks. She is the REDD Plus National Forest Monitoring Cluster Coordinator at the FAO. She has recorded a video for us.
It's my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of FAO's REDD Plus and National Forest Monitoring Cluster. Forests play an important role in climate change mitigation. The goals of the Paris Agreement can only be reached with significant emission reductions from halting deforestation and enhancing removals from forests. And the vehicle for realizing this crucial forest mitigation is REDD Plus, which is also embedded in the Paris Agreement. But achieving and demonstrating emission reductions from forests is not simple. Only mitigation contributions that are duly measured, reported and verified can be recognized to contribute to countries' own targets in their NDCs and to attract funding for results-based payments. Results-based payments to countries that have achieved emission reductions have been an essential element of the REDD Plus vision from the start, but it's only in the last few years that they've actually been realized. To access these new opportunities for results-based payments, countries need to dedicate even greater efforts to solid forest monitoring and reporting on emission reductions. At the same time, carbon markets are opening up and demand signals are increasing for offsets from countries' REDD Plus efforts, whether in the context of NDCs or voluntary purposes. Again, interested countries need to work to meet MRV requirements for offset-grade emission reductions. In short, the world needs forest countries to step up in reducing emissions from forests. Forest countries need enhanced financing flows to reward and fund the delivery of further emission reductions. And to make all of this possible, countries need solid MRV systems and transparent reporting. Today's discussions, from reporting to payments, will reflect on whether and how the progress by countries can be rewarded and sustained. I wish you a fruitful exchange.
All right, that's excellent. Although she couldn't be here with us, it's an excellent start for this webinar, and thank you to Astrid in her absence for recording this welcome for us. Expectations are then high for the next hour to give everyone a rather solid update on what is the latest on REDD Plus reporting to the UNFCCC. We're proud to say we have a lot of participants registered for the event. We're getting close to 500 persons, other than from Antarctica and the deep sea, I think from pretty much everywhere else in the world. One of our objectives for the session today is to launch the 2020 installment in a series of annual publications by FAO that helps those interested in REDD Plus to make sense of REDD Plus reporting. You know, things like forest reference emission levels, BUR technical annexes, GCF results-based payment proposals, and these things. That new publication is called From Reference Levels to Results Reporting, REDD Plus under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. We will broadcast to the link to that publication for download in a minute through the chat boxes. But before we do that, let us start out our discussion. Let us start out the session with a succinct summary of what that publication actually says. Here's Marika Sandker. She is the technical lead for forest reference levels and greenhouse gas inventory reporting at the FAO, and she is also the brain behind that publication. She has prepared a short, pointed, and informative presentation for us that summarizes what we all should be knowing about REDD Plus reporting for the UNFCCC. Over to Marika, please.
Good day, everyone. My name is Marika Sandker, and in the next 5 minutes, I will give you an update on REDD Plus reporting to the UNFCCC. This presentation summarizes the publication that we are launching today. And this publication has been published annually by FAO since the year 2017 to share experiences from countries with countries, so countries can learn from each other and be inspired by each other. Now, this slide shows the tremendous progress that countries have made over the past 7 years. Up to date, we have 50 countries that have submitted a reference level to the UNFCCC. And if we look at the lower end of the timeline, we can see that by now 13 countries have reported REDD+ results. I'm very glad and very proud that today in our panel discussion, we have representatives from Papua New Guinea and Uganda, both countries that have recently reported REDD+ results to the UNFCCC. Now, all these results combined add up to 9 billion tons of CO2 equivalent. And to put that into perspective, that is more or less the same amount as the annual fossil fuel emissions from the United States, the European Union, and Australia combined. If we show the countries from the previous slide on a map, we see a geographically very balanced participation in REDD+. And these countries that you see here that have submitted a reference level together are responsible for 75% of the global deforestation, indicating the significance of their participation. So if we look inside the reference levels that have been submitted, we can see that deforestation is the most frequently included activity. And also the REDD+ results that have been submitted are mostly coming from reduction in deforestation. Now, the plus activities are defined differently by countries. So to make them more comparable, we translate them into removals from non-forest to forest land and removals from forest land remaining forest land, or if you wish, the opposite of deforestation and forest degradation. We can then see that removals in forest land remaining forest land is the least reported on. Now let's have a look at a few facts which are further elaborated in the publication. So for decades now, countries have reported forest statistics to the Global Forest Resources Assessment. But what's new with REDD+ reporting is that the UNFCCC organizes a technical assessment. And this does have an impact. We can see that because in 96% of the finalized technical assessments, countries decide to submit a modified reference level. And in 77%, they actually change the value. So methodological improvements are being made during this process, but also if we look over the years, countries have made significant methodological improvements, moving towards more robust sample-based approaches. With these improvements, they also increase the reporting of uncertainty, which is very important for transparency. The most frequently mentioned objective in reference level submissions is to get access to results-based finance. In 2017, the Green Climate Fund launched a pilot program for results-based payment with a total envelope of $500 million. To date, 6 countries have been awarded results-based payments, together consuming slightly over 70% of the total envelope. And in the next board meeting next month, Argentina and Costa Rica are also going to present their funding proposals. So with that, I would like to hand it over now to the panelists and let them start the discussion. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Marike, for preparing this video for us. 50 countries are submitting reference levels, and there are 9 billion tons of emission reduction. About the same as the annual fossil fuel emissions of the United States, the European Union, and Australia combined. And that is quite something. And that is what we'll discuss about with our panelists in a minute. Marike will also broadcast the link to this paper through the chat boxes. She may already be doing that. So check there, you click on the link and you can download that publication to your computer to look at it. Our panelists will then comment on what we have heard here, and they will add some of their own views on REDD+ reporting I will introduce our panelists now. So I hope that all panelists can please activate their videos now so that everyone can get a good look at who we have here. All participants, while you listen, please type your questions and remarks into the Q&A box for us, because there will be an opportunity for our panelists to also respond to some of the remarks from the audience. I will select some of your questions from there and then ask the panelists to respond. On our panel, we have, firstly, Margaret Afiyeno-Vibesa. She is the Assistant Commissioner for Forestry and the REDD+ National Focal Point in Uganda's Ministry of Water and Environment. Second, we also have Ellen Brazelius-Bakker. She is the Policy Director at Norway's International Climate and Forest Initiative, NICFI, in the Norwegian Ministry of Climate and Environment. Thirdly, we have Huan Chang, who is the Principal Forest and Land Use Specialist with the Green Climate Fund. We have, fourthly, Peter Iversen, the team lead of the FOLO unit at the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And last but not least, we have Alfred Rungal. He is the General Manager MRV at PNG's Climate Change Development Authority. All right, this is a very strong panel, as you can see, and we start out with a round of questions to our panelists that I have pre-prepared, largely to ask them to react to Marika's presentation there. And then everyone can also ask questions. Don't forget to put your concerns and your ideas into the Q&A box. We will get to your questions also. But we start out with Peter. While Peter is speaking, let everyone else please switch off their videos so we can save on the bandwidth. But Peter, you please leave your video on. Peter, you get us started. Peter, what's the objective of REDD+, please? Speak to us about this. When you just heard Marika say that there is 9 billion tons of emission reductions that have been reported so far, is that the objective of REDD+? Is this what the international community tries to achieve with REDD+? And can we then maybe say that that whole process is really going extremely well for us? Peter, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Till. Thank you for the question. Yeah, I think it was a huge success already when countries agreed what is relevant and important to address climate change mitigation in the forest sector. And the second huge success also the establishment of forest monitoring capacities, which are unprecedented and would not have been imagined 10 years ago. When we look what was really the objective, we parties agreed that in the context of the provision of adequate and predictable support to developing country parties should collectively aim to slow, halt, and reverse forest cover and carbon loss in accordance with national circumstances, consistent with the ultimate objective of the convention. This was back in Cancun at COP16. The Warsaw Framework was agreed a few years later at COP19. And starting from that COP, parties had the opportunity to submit reference levels. Marika just went through the number of submissions and the results and so on. And I think this is clearly a success. You can, of course, always wish for more, but I think it is a clear success. Is it going extremely well? I remember from the early days of REDD+, I think, yes, you can always hope for things to move faster. I also think most governments, organizations, individuals involved in this acknowledge that deforestation, forest degradation, and all the issues linked to this, including tenure, I mean, this is not solved overnight. We also know from countries working on implementing REDD+ that this has generated a lot of national activities, development of national strategies, consultation activities, dialogues with local communities, indigenous peoples, other stakeholders, etc. So it is very positive, and I would say this is a success. Yeah, I think I will end my answer here. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Excellent, and you used a lot of strong words. They're unprecedented, and yes, extremely well. So thank you for that, Peter. I think you get us off on a very good start. Let's turn over to Alfred. Let's turn over to Alfred, who is with PNG, with the CCDA in PNG, which is, well, one of the countries, one of the 50 countries that participate in REDD+ reporting. So let's hear from Alfred. What does this take for a country to do? How much effort is behind that reporting? Alfred, speak to us about the REDD+ process in PNG, please.
It was a great effort in PNG. It involves multi-sectors, including the government, private sector, CSO, and academia. In PNG, it requires capacity building on all levels in terms of building capacity of government officers and stakeholders on all aspects of REDD+. Implementation was hard and very expensive, as we experienced, but it was worth it. Forest is the main center of our life and culture in PNG. As you know, PNG has 97% of land is customary land ownership. Through REDD+ readiness process, we have a much better understanding of our forest resources at the moment. It's changed over time and a driver of deforestation and forest degradation. Basically, the reliable forest information enables us to establish adequate policies and also identify necessary activities for sustainable use of forest resources and biodiversity in PNG. This includes efforts like us submitting PNG forest reference level for PNG, and also the development of our national forest monitoring system, NFS, and also the national REDD+ strategy and all action plan, and also the recent completion of our safeguard information system, which is now waiting approval from the National Executive Council before submission to the United Nations Climate Convention. Our annex to the REDD+ was submitted. This sets the scene for PNG to venture into result-based payment at the moment. Our efforts, the procedures was also supported by multi-parties, including development partners and key stakeholders in PNG.
Mm-hmm. You know, it has a reaction with me when you say that in PNG the forests are close to your heart, and that's why maybe also the forest reference emission level is somewhat close to people's heart. But just one thing, if you can elaborate, Alfred, how many years has PNG been working on this? So the reference level was submitted a few years ago, but when did REDD+ start? What kind of process is this? For how many years have you been working on this in PNG? Alfred?
Yes, thank you, Till. I think PNG was the forefront in REDD+ back then, under the UN COP meetings. I think from the beginning, we initiated with some other countries. Back then, we decided to have the office, the government established the office back in 2010. Then we started work on some activities in terms of REDD+, the MRV system, the National Forest Monitoring System, and also the reference level. Yep.
Well, that's excellent. So this is a multi-year process around 2010 started. That's an impressive thing to hear you speak about. Margaret, let's turn over to you. Let's turn over to Africa. Let's turn over to Uganda. Margaret, please speak to us a bit about why a country does this. A multi-year process. We've heard Alfred speak about like 10 years or so that went into this in his country. Why do countries do that to themselves? What's the objective of a country that participates in such reporting? Why do you put together these reports and why do you put so much effort into this? Margaret, over to you, please.
Yeah, so Uganda has been participating in REDD+ process all the way from 2008 to date. And we've gone into a number of reportings. But basically, I would like to say the main objective why Uganda is reporting to the UNFCCC and to the other bodies like World Bank is really for us to get our results-based payment for our actions, climate change, mitigation, adaptation actions. So we think that is a very good avenue for us, because if we do this in a very transparent manner, involving all the different stakeholders, then Uganda can qualify for results-based payments. Uganda also is doing reporting for a number of other reasons. One, we know that if we are to report to the convention UNFCCC, it's important that we have quality data, quality technical reports, and reports that are data that is collected and analyzed in a very transparent manner. So as a country, we've gone through this, and now we know where our capacity lies. So this reporting has enabled us carry out a capacity needs assessment in terms of human resource, the kind of human resource we need, the kind of technology, methodology that we need, the kind of training that our people in country will need in order to continue reporting to UNFCCC and to the different donors. The other one is that these reports are very important, not only for international purposes reporting, but also for our national planning and development processes, including for policy decision making. So as a country, Uganda has taken this seriously, and I think we have built quite a bit of capacity, but we still have a lot of gaps. Uganda has submitted a forest reference emission levels, so we know where we are in terms of emission. And on top of that, Uganda becomes the first African country to submit a biannual update report and a REDD+ technical assessment report. And to us, I think that's a very big positive. And now we are working towards preparing for result-based payment. Uganda is also reporting, or has also reported on, submitted its national communication, both the first and the second. The first was in 2004, and the second was in 2014. And the country is in the process of preparing the third national communication. This one is also very important because it provides information on the efforts the country is taking towards meeting its nationally determined contribution towards mitigating climate change and reducing emissions. Uganda has also submitted, of course, a nationally determined contribution to UNFCCC because we are party to it. We have an NDC 2015, and of course, it's a living document. It will be updated as and when the country is ready. I would say that reporting has really helped, and it's quite important for countries to report, because it really shows us where we have gaps, where we need technological support, where we need financial support. And to me, I think that is one of the main objectives, apart from getting results-based payment and also showing the world where we are towards our NDC implementation and contribution to mitigating climate change.
Okay, Margaret, that's excellent. Thank you very much for that contribution. So there's several contexts really, in case of Uganda at least. It's not only results-based payments, there's many other very important objectives that you speak about there. National development targets. It's also, it simply shows where the gaps are. It's simply important for countries to say. But let's speak a bit more about those results-based payments. Let's turn over to Juan from the Green Climate Fund. Those results-based payments, Juan, they are consistently mentioned by countries that participate in REDD+ as one of the principal objectives of why countries do this. The Green Climate Fund is one of the principal means by which countries can access those results-based payments. So talk to us a bit about the status of results-based payments. One of the things that Marika said is that 77% of the funding that was available in the GCF's pilot program went to 6 countries only. But she also said that there's about 50 countries that have submitted reference levels. So how about the remaining 44 countries? Juan? Please speak to us a little bit about the position of the GCF, and maybe if you want also more in general, to what extent the donor support is commensurate with the needs of countries. Juan, over to you, please.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Till and FAO colleagues for inviting the Green Climate Fund to this session. And we are very happy to see another release of this publication, which has been already accompanying a process that we have been developing in the GCF for implementing the REDD Plus results-based payments. Now, on your first question, I happen to have spontaneously a slide. If you allow me to share my screen very quickly, can you confirm that you are looking at my screen?
It's coming up. Yes, it's there.
Yeah, this will help explain what's the status of the results-based payments in the GCF. We made the first payment, or the GCF, or the board approved the first payment for Brazil at the B22, the board meeting of the 22. Then we have subsequently the B23 meeting with Ecuador, Chile, Paraguay. The last board meeting, the board approved proposals for Colombia, Indonesia. And these are the 6 countries with 77% of the funds. And we expect to have Argentina and Costa Rica, as Marike also mentioned, the next board meeting for board consideration. And with that, we will be exhausting all the funds that the board approved for this pilot program. And as Margaret was mentioning, in Africa, we don't have any country. We see that majority of the funds were for Latin American countries and one for Asia. Certainly, we are hoping that a continuation of the program would allow more countries to participate. We saw that Uganda presented the results and potentially coming soon to a potential new program for payments on the GCF. And we also have received all the proposals from other countries, even though we have already exhausted the funds, or most likely going to exhaust the funds at the next board meeting. We have see an increasing demand from countries asking for results-based payments. Now the question is what to do with the big demand that is coming. We have maybe in the best case scenario 8 countries with receiving payments, and we'll have more than 40 looking for payments in the near future. Well, I think here we need to be mindful that I don't think there will be enough public funding available to pay for all these results. We need to think how the private sector should also be part of the process on the demand, but also on the supply. And that I think is going to be, it's already happening around us. We see already a lot of engagement with private sector, and we need to see how we bring them together. In relation to donors, I hope that there are donors listening, and we have a donor in the panel eventually may want to comment on that. We already have a system that is running. It shows that we can translate UNFCCC decisions into payments. May not be the perfect system, but it's already moving. Countries are already engaged. There is incentive to move forward. We cannot attribute that the increase of the reports to the convention are necessarily because of the payments, but eventually they are an additional incentive for countries to expedite their processes and report and learn and so on. So we hope that the process will allow more participation for countries, and hopefully the board of the fund will consider an expansion of this program further.
Okay. Thank you very much, Juan, for those views. There is a functioning machinery at the Green Climate Fund. However, the money is almost gone. But then the Green Climate Fund is not the only way for countries to access results-based payments. There have also been direct deals, not with the Green Climate Fund, but directly with donor governments or with multilaterals. One of the most important donor governments is Norway. It's Norway, and we have Ellen on the panel, who works at NICFI. Ellen, please speak to us a little bit about how Norway enters into agreements for results-based payments with countries. To what extent does Norway, being one of the leading REDD+ donors, make results-based payments against those UNFCCC reported results that we heard Marike speak about? To what extent are these two processes connected to each other? Ellen, over to you, please.
Thank you, Till. And first of all, thank you to GFOI for putting together this webinar. I think the interest and the number of attendees clearly shows that there is a want and a desire to share reflections and experiences on this topic. So it's really good to see that we can get together, even in this testing times of Corona. It's not easy for the majority of us. First of all, I'd just like to say that I'm really encouraged by the number of countries who have submitted FRELs. Like Marika said, the number of countries who have engaged in that process and submitted reference levels to the UNFCCC has been increasing. We also see an increasing numbers of countries submitting results in their biennial update reports. And I think that's really great to see. And I hope that's also an indication that the countries are gradually building that basis of analysis of factual information about their forests and their change in the forest that's needed to understand the deforestation that's taking place, the drivers of deforestation. I think this is a very important basis for designing policies to address deforestation. And obviously, it's also the basis for assessing the effect of these policies. So just like both Alfred and Margaret touched upon, the work in relation to the FREL, it's not only for international reporting, it's actually the basis for the efforts that are to be taken. And I hope that the indication of more and more FRELs coming in also shows that the countries find that there is a more and more comprehensive basis for those policies. So that's really good. The FRELs are an indicator of the basis for information about forests and what's happening to the forests. Now, I think, at least from my perspective, I see the FRELs as one reference level, but there are several. I mean, we need several policy tools to understand and address deforestation. So, to say it bluntly, a country can very viably have several reference level. One business as usual level to see what happens if there are no policies. One with measures. One with additional measures to see what's the future look like. What do we need? What kind of policies do we need to address this deforestation? So I think, at least for me, it's important to recognize that different reference levels serve different purposes. And we need to keep that in mind, because I think there's also a difference between a country estimating the effect of policies and a change in the trend to having a reference level against which one wants to be paid for. I think for results-based payment, especially in a market, there is a need for a standardized approach. There is need for transparency, of course, for comparability across countries. And in light of what science is telling us, there's also a need for a clear pathway towards zero deforestation. To continue to think that high reference levels, looking a decade or two into the future, is a good basis for payment. I'm not sure that's how that communicates with the science that we know. So we need to see that also reference levels take into account the pathway towards zero deforestation. I think several of previous panel speakers commented on the role of markets and private sector and private finance. And I think it's fair to say that private sector and markets won't pay for results determined on rules that sort of, everyone makes up from themselves. There is a need for a standardized approach there. The Norwegian intention and approach has been to try to work out approaches that can actually work in a market to be create that framework and predictability that everybody will recognize and know. And I hope that together with our partners, we will get there. Thank you.
All right, Ellen, thank you very much for those thoughts. Yes, and one of the things that you said there is that there is a need for standardization, of course. Another thing that you said is that there could be different kinds of reference levels for different objectives, and I think that resonates with a lot of people, of course. Yes. If I can dig just slightly bit deeper. So we're speaking here, Marika's presentation was mainly about the UNFCCC reference levels. To what extent do these UNFCCC reference levels underlie results-based payments that Norway makes?
Thank you for that question, Till. As I tried to communicate in my first intervention, I think that the work that the countries undertake in connection with their forest reference levels to the UNFCCC is very important. It's the basis for knowing what's happening to the forest and basis for designing policies and for assessing the effects of policies. But I mean, if you look at the multilateral approaches for results-based payments, thinking of the Green Climate Fund, Juan spoke previously, and also the World Bank FCPF, there are slight, I'm not sure slight is the right word, but none of these just take the UNFCCC reference levels and apply them to a results-based payment scheme. So I think it's fair to say that those out there willing to make results-based payment have also recognized that there is a need for a little bit clearer rule set for results-based payment than what has been provided by the Warsaw Framework.
Okay.
For Norway, sorry?
No, excellent. Please continue, please.
As I think attendees to this webinar, we know we have had bilateral MRV protocols with some of our partner countries, like with Indonesia, where we have had one verification of results. And I think if you go back to the very beginning for NICFI, with Brazil back in 2008, Brazil came to us with an approach. It had a rationale for what the reference level should be, for how it would be updated, taking into account recent developments in the years or in new years. And there was a certain conservativeness built into that reference level. And that was something that we could go along with. So I think that's where it all started. And from then it's been a big thinking process really to see what works, what's something that not just Norway, but also other donor countries and also the private market will want to be a part of. I think that's really important to keep in mind, because although Norway is committed and dedicated to this, we need everybody to be part of it.
Okay. We need everybody to be part of it. I like that. I like that as a conclusion for this contribution. Thank you very much, Ellen. That's excellent. In a minute, we turn over to take some questions from the audience also. Before we do that, Peter, I'm going to ask one question back to you again. And this is because we speak about reference level submissions to UNFCCC, and we're speaking about results-based payment. Yes, and then one of the things that Ellen said is that not only NICFI, but also other donors typically make results-based payments against not necessarily the same reference levels that were submitted to the UNFCCC. But then accessing results-based payments is one of the key objectives of countries, and that we have heard from Margaret and from Alfred. So how do you bring that together at the UNFCCC? To what extent were those UNFCCC reported results ever meant to actually underlie results-based payments? And I think there's many other objectives here, and that's something you spoke about. So to what extent is there a need to bring these two contexts together? To what extent is there scope for the UNFCCC to grow more relevant to results-based payments? Peter, over to you on this, please. And then we take some questions also from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Till. I think it's worth to consider, like the Warsaw Framework is a framework for REDD+ action, much in the same ways as the Climate Convention is a framework for action on climate change. I think with the Climate Convention, we've seen adoption of legal instrument, Kyoto Protocol, Paris Agreement, etc., to adapt to the actual implementation of the convention over time. I think in the same way, the Warsaw Framework provides a framework for all of the elements that needs to be in place. And with this framework, REDD+ countries are free to choose their activities in accordance with the national circumstances and priorities, as long as they can prove that this is methodologically sound, or that the existing problems will be addressed as part of the stepwise approach. And in our view, early action to reduce deforestation, of course, is also more powerful than perfect action several years later. But at the same time, this approach also allowed donors to provide their own requirements within the and on how to assess the results, just like we see the GCF is already doing with the scorecard. So I think the framework, it evolves by implementation and by adapting it to each country's funding sources and national situation, and potentially including it also in national determined contribution. What remains important is the transparency. This will help to open dialogue between stakeholders locally, nationally, internationally, and it will also help address many of the changes we have with, you could say, other approaches. I think, yeah, I mean, REDD Plus is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And I think there is, the way the Warsaw framework is built up, there is possibilities to work inside under the wings of the Warsaw framework. And I think this could be very helpful. Thank you very much.
So REDD Plus is a marathon, it's not a sprint. Why is it not a football game, Peter? Thank you, that's excellent. All right, good. That's the first round of interaction with our panelists. Now let's take some of the questions from the audience. I start out with a question to Juan, please. Fiona asked this question. She asked whether there should be a uniform reference period in methodology. And Errol has also commented on this, and Carlos has pointed to the JNR requirements. So there's some discussion on all of these contexts around durations of reference periods. Juan, speak to us a little bit about this topic if you can. And I know that there's a bit of work ongoing at the Green Climate Fund to also look at the scorecard again. To what extent is there an indication that the GCF is also considering this, changing reference periods? Juan, can you please speak about this for us? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. Well, to make sure that it's very clear that at the Green Climate Fund, we operate under the mandates that comes from the convention, and the decision that was made there was that the GCF should implement results-based payment in accordance to the decisions of the COP and following the Warsaw framework. And as Peter mentioned, it is a framework. From there, we can add a process that allows translating that framework into payments, but we are not in a position to create new requirements for countries to access to payments. So it is not in the GCF's mandate to add any additional requirements than what countries already have under the convention. Hope that answered the question.
Thank you, Juan. Thank you, Juan. This is excellent. Thank you. Alan, I have another question for you. Also a question from the audience where there was questions around the new planet data that are becoming available. And I think the discussion in the Q&A window in the chat box is about to what extent those, what the role of those planet data really is and to what extent they can help reducing the uncertainties for results reporting. Topic that we all have on our mind because of the big announcement that Norway has made on providing satellite images. Alan, speak to us a little bit about why you're doing this and what it could do for uncertainties in REDD Plus reporting.
Yes, thank you, Till, and thank you for that question. I'm very glad to be able to also speak about our recent procurement of satellite images at this opportunity. As you know, Norway has procured high-resolution satellite images of the tropical land masses, not just the forest, but all the land masses between 30th degrees north and 30th degrees south. And we are making it available to the public freely, no charge, with mosaics being updated every month. That is something we do because we understood that there was a need and a desire in the forest countries for high resolution data, both in terms of spatial high resolution. This data is less than 5 meters in spatial resolution. And also we understood that there was a need and a desire for higher temporal resolution. in order to accommodate both technical difficulties like cloud cover, etc., but also for policy implementation purposes to address, for instance, illegal deforestation. So to be honest, it's a resource that we are making available. We're really hoping that everyone will make the most of these data that we are putting out there. So I'd just like to encourage everybody to use it. The website is www.planet.com/NICFI. And whether it will reduce uncertainty estimates, I hope so. I can't speak for all countries across the tropics, but certainly reducing uncertainties is one of the key things we hope that we can achieve through this data. But I also have respect for that they will be applied differently in different circumstances and in different countries.
Okay, so that is a major contribution that NICFI is making these days. Thank you very much for this, Ellen. So we all hope that countries will use these data and that will help our quest for high quality results reporting, of course. But then there is another question in the chat window. People are asking about readiness funding, and readiness funding is drying up. That's what the discussion says in the chat window. Yeah, that's of course put some countries in a difficult position, and I hope that Margaret can speak a little bit about this. Margaret, what do you need to continue participating in REDD+ reporting? To what extent is there a need for further readiness investments in your country? What do you need in order to continue improving data and estimates? Is it done with the with the availability of those satellite images that are that Ellen has just spoken about, or is there more? Is there more that you would need in order to continue reporting and improving the quality of estimates? Margaret, over to you, please.
Thank you to Norway and also for the offer. I think Uganda will be one of the countries to benefit from that technology. However, Uganda still needs in-country work. As I said, Uganda also submitted its FREL, the first proposed FREL in 2017, and it was improved upon. Now we have the 2018 FREL. On the UNFCCC website. But the only activity data that was considered was deforestation. However, we need to consider all the other activity data. That is the plus, the degradation, the enhancement of carbon stocks, the enhancement of biodiversity, and sustainable forest management. So all that needs to be included, and Uganda is doing it on a stepwise, using a stepwise approach. So that is another area where Uganda really needs support to improve on its FREL. The other one is to update our data series, the data collection and analysis. As I said, one of the reasons why the country is reporting is also to build capacity, but also to carry out a country needs assessment. Where do we need support in terms of technology, in terms of human resource, in terms of reporting? So Uganda still needs a lot of support in terms of monitoring, reporting, verification, and also updating those data series and also collecting the relevant data. And I also realized the country lacks a bit in carbon reporting. We used to do our forest inventories and reporting using the usual old forestry way. But currently using if we have to report to the different bodies, the UNFCCC, we have to meet the required international standards. So that's an area where we shall still need support. We need also to improve on our national forest monitoring system. We have a national forest monitoring system with support from World Bank, FAO. We now have a national forest monitoring system. However, we have to ensure that it is fully operational and also at all levels, not only at national level, because we have different stakeholders who participate in monitoring of this forest resource. So we require that operationalization of our national forest monitoring system at all levels, and also to meet the Cancun and also agreements. That level of reporting is very critical.
Okay. I'm going to cut you a little bit short because we're running already out of time, but please make your last point if you can.
Okay. And also one more thing we need to understand, and the management of national fire regimes. Fires is one of the biggest contributors of greenhouse gas emissions in our country. So we need support under that, towards that, and also establishing a national registry for recording activities and transactions related to REDD+. I think for that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Margaret. No, that's a great rundown. And well, it looks like a lot of things are set ready. For improving, but there's still gaps. And this is just one country, of course. No, this is one example country that we've heard about. But let's also hear from Alfred a little bit about this. Alfred, let's assume for a minute that everything goes very well. That everything goes well, and that things continue. Where do you think PNG's REDD+ reporting could stand in 2030? How do you think things will develop? What could happen? What could go wrong? What could go right? Will forest monitoring be a sound machinery, maybe like that football game that Peter spoke about? Alfred, speak to us a little bit about what you think the future brings for REDD+ reporting in PNG.
Thank you, Theo. PNG is one of the countries that proposed the idea of REDD+ back in UNFCCC 2005. We continue to progress REDD+ in the country. National Forest Monitoring System is the key to sustainable forest management. Reliable information enable us, PNG, to make right decision at the moment, and it has taken appropriate actions in the country. However, the current pace of development of international REDD+ mechanism is too slow. Example, now we are faced with Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. It's still under negotiations in markets, non-markets. The emission of PNG has been negligible level is strictly. PNG is not, as you know, not responsible for climate change, like most of the developed countries. However, statistically speaking, PNG, people in PNG, based on statistics, the social economic data and rate of development by several studies done concludes that PNG is rated as one of the poor countries. Based on this information, indicating in the rural areas in PNG, especially the landowners or forest or landowners, which most don't have access to the basic needs and services that basic people need in the country. Nevertheless, on the other hand, I want to stress that the global community, that the landowners or the real rural communities are very rich among the environment. I'm referring to the environment like forest, for example, rivers in the forest, and also looking at mangroves, oceans. Therefore, country like PNG desperately needs development in these areas.
Alfred, I need to cut you also a little bit short, just because of time. So, if you also would make your last point, please.
Yes, and to conclude, the REDD+ system that PNG needs is to effectively support the country's needs, like other countries that are not doing the effort in forest reference level and REDD+ technical annex. This is very important to us. So, yes, we are keen to continue in this process in the REDD+ space.
Okay. No, that's great to hear you say that. Alfred, everyone, I think we're almost at the end of our session today. We're going close to the end of the hour today. I'm already going to say, Alfred, if you please mute your microphone because there's a bit of interference. Thank you. I'm just going to say very quickly, thanks to all participants for joining and for the many questions that you've made. And I'm sorry that we haven't been able to go through all of them and answer all questions now live online. But what I can offer is that you reach out to us and that you put those questions that you really think that shouldn't have gone unanswered, that you put them in an email and send that email to us. And what we do in a minute is we will put an email address for this purpose in the chat box. And if you really want to reiterate your question or just discuss with the FAO team, then please send us a message. And I can personally promise that no message that you send us will go unanswered. But yes, let's conclude this. And I will hand over to Julian Fox for doing this. Julian Fox is the team leader of the National Forest Monitoring Team at the FAO. He will synthesize the session for us. That's not an easy thing to do because a lot of things were said, but we got the right man for doing this. Julian, over to you, please.
Thank you, Till. I hope you can hear me. Thank you so much to our panelists today for their candid responses. I will revisit some of the emerging themes and attempt to define a pathway forward, which won't be easy. But thanks to Peter for confirming the excellent progress in country REDD+ reporting from the point of view of the UNFCCC, with 50 countries generating information from their national forest monitoring systems and submitting forest reference levels to the UNFCCC for independent and transparent review, and how the Warsaw Framework provides a foundation for REDD+, which indeed it does. Thank you so much to Margaret and Alfred for describing their objectives and the efforts required for engaging in REDD+ reporting. Country participation in these processes takes commitment, and we need to ensure that forest countries remain engaged in the process and motivated by the multiple benefits that REDD+ participation can deliver. It was really great to hear that national forest monitoring systems are being used for strengthening forest management and forest policy, and that both countries are striving for quality forest data for MRV purposes. I'm sure what we have heard from the UNFCCC, the GCF, and Norway today will galvanize this commitment. It was great to hear from Juan that there is a possibility for further GCF results-based payments and the possibilities for involving private finance. This is good news, and countries that are working towards completing their REDD+ results submissions to the UNFCCC will be really interested to follow these developments. It was also great to hear from Alan on the linkages between MRV, forest monitoring, and forest policy, and the words on markets, the private sector, and the need for standardized high-quality emission reductions from forests. This certainly incentivizes countries to keep improving their national forest monitoring systems for high-quality forest data, and really exciting to learn more about the freely available high-resolution monthly mosaics. I wanted to return briefly to the publication we have launched today and make some key observations that can help us chart a pathway forward. The publication indicates that an increasing number of countries are reporting uncertainties, which is crucial for transparency. And countries are increasingly using more robust, more accurate sample-based approaches in recent submissions. It is great to note that the UNFCCC review process has triggered this stepwise improvement, and 8 countries have submitted more than one reference level and have introduced more robust methods in their later submissions. These are good signs and follow the IPCC guidance and best practices from GFOI's methods and guidance document. It is clear that we need to support countries in reporting and reducing uncertainties and in the application of robust methodology to ensure the integrity of emission reductions and enhancements. This can further strengthen the excellent progress we have seen to date. We are working off a good base with national forest monitoring systems in many countries, and in the spirit of stepwise improvement, as mentioned by Margaret, countries can identify gaps and needs critical to quality emission reductions and enhancements, and forest monitoring support providers can provide targeted and coordinated capacity development, can help fill these gaps and needs for maximum cost effectiveness. And there's a clear role for GFOI and the community to coordinate this support. We also have forest monitoring platforms to implement more robust strategy, such as FAO CEPAL. And thanks to NICFI, we now also have standardized high-resolution reference imagery that is perfect for implementing more robust methodologies such as stratified area estimation. I wanted to briefly revert to a publication we launched at a GFOI webinar 2 weeks ago, Better Data, Better Decisions, with guidance on how accessible, transparent, reliable, credible, and relevant forest monitoring can help countries make better decisions for forest management. Building on today's discussion, I think we are gaining clarity on how multi-purpose forest monitoring can support decision-making within the country and can support high-quality emission reductions and enhancements. This can also support jurisdictional programs such as the World Bank's Carbon Fund and emerging standards such as art trees. From FAO's side, the pathway forward is clear. We need to work together to ensure that forest monitoring results in quality, emission reductions and enhancements, and that MRV processes can be catalytic for much needed action for forests and climate. Thank you so much to the panelists, our moderator Till, and the GFOI Secretariat for enabling today's webinar. And big thanks to you, the over 200 participants, for joining us today. It clearly demonstrates the huge interest in REDD+ and encourages us to keep driving forward at full speed. Thank you very much for your support. Have a great Wednesday and a great week. Thank you very much. Signing off from FAO Rome.